at the forefront of politics.
Our enemy is Trump. He is the enemy. We gotta unite. If we're not a united party, we lose to Trump.
On the front lines of activism.
There's certain fights, if we don't engage, they win. This is a fundamental question of who we are.
And delivering your daily dose of comedy.
Donald Trump, when he had his physical, they had his blood pressure, and mine is higher than his. Oh. And the irony is mine is higher because of him.
From the blue wave.
We flipped. Enough seats to take control of the House. We control the House.
To 2020 and beyond. This is the Dean Obeidallah Show on Sirius XM Progress, Channel 127.
And welcome to the show, brothers and sisters. It is Monday, August 12th. I am Dean Obeidallah. As always, your needy MBFF. I'm there on Twitter, Facebook.com/Dean of Radio, or just Dean at deanofradio.com. 449. What does that number mean? Right off the top of the head. I say 449. What do you think? Exactly. That's how many days there are till Judgment Day. To November 3rd, 2020, the most important election of our lifetimes. Seriously, I can't think of another election more. Anyone alive now, unless you were voting maybe in 1932 in the middle of the Depression, this is it. This has got to be it, this election coming up. And, you know, a lot of interesting things I hope you had a good weekend. I hope you had some fun. I was on Joy Reid's show Sunday. Love being on Joy's show. And then I was also on Kenneth Gibson's show, which is rare to do two shows in the same day for MS. I'm not a contributor. I just go on the shows. But it was great to see Kenneth as well and Joy Reid, my buddy. But something interesting happened, and it's relevant to what I want to talk about today. Because today's an anniversary, a 2-year anniversary of something that I think is extremely important, should be discussed more. And the media, unless I'm missing something, have completely ignored it. Although maybe tomorrow they're going to cover it because of just counting the days. And I'll get into it in a second. But first, on Rachel Maddow's show on Friday, she highlighted 3 people who are suing Nazis, neo-Nazis. One person who was Jewish, one person who was black, and one person who was Muslim. I'm the Muslim one, of course, as you know, because I've talked about this lawsuit forever. And she was very nice. I'll play just a minute of it. And it's not because she mentions my name. That's a small part of it. Okay, just a little bit of it that she talks about me. And she says my name perfectly right. But in any event, and I like Rachel. I interviewed her for The Muslims Are Coming, my documentary that I made with my friend Nagin Farsad. So I'm not saying we're BFFs or anything, but I might be her MBFF. If it comes down to it, I'm probably her closest Muslim friend. So here is Rachel Maddow from Friday. Just a little bit of it, clip number 1.
You might have heard over the last couple of months that the Daily Stormer has been on the receiving end of some really expensive lightning bolts thrown at them in court by some of their past victims. In June, it was comedian and commentator Dean Obeidallah. A couple of years ago, Dean Obeidallah had written a column for the Daily Beast in which he described a bunch of murders that had been committed in the first year of Donald Trump's presidency by killers who had expressed white supremacist beliefs or motives. The column said in part, quote, Trump refuses to call these acts what they are, white supremacist terrorism. Well, the neo-Nazis at the Daily Stormer, a website that, it should be noted, endorsed Donald Trump for president, they did not like that criticism against President Trump in that column by Dean Obeidallah, and they responded the following day by making up some fake tweets that they attributed to Mr. Obeidallah, and they published those fake tweets online, which made it look like Mr. Obeidallah was actually a terrorist. They had these fake tweets made where he appeared to be taking credit for various violent terrorist attacks around the globe, using this false information that they put online. They then directed white supremacist trolls and neo-Nazis around the country and around the world to go get Dean Obeidallah.
Go get Dean Obeidallah. She called me Mr. Obeidallah a few times, which just call me Dean. Call me your MBFF. There's no need to do that. Now, the reason this is relevant, besides me just getting a kick out of Rachel Maddow mentioning my name and pronouncing it perfectly, is that today is the anniversary of something that I do not understand for the life of me. A 2-year anniversary of something horrific that happened that's tied to something we just saw in the last 2 weeks. It's tied to something we've seen numerous times in the last 2 years in our media, and I do not know for the life of me why. 2 years ago today was the Charlottesville white supremacist rally. And at that very rally, there was a white supremacist terror attack with a car driven by a self-avowed neo-Nazi. James Fields drove his car and killed Heather Heyer. It was 2 years ago today. And last year there's a lot of coverage. And I'm missing something unless they're calculating and it's tomorrow. And I'm happy if it gets coverage tomorrow. But even if it gets covered tomorrow, I think this is important to talk about. And my article, and the one that Rachel Maddow just talked about, that I wrote for the Daily Beast predated by 3 months the Charlottesville terror attack. There already had been 3 instances on U.S. soil by self-avowed white supremacists killing Americans. And that's why I said in that article, Trump must use the words white supremacist terrorism. In those 2 years, though, since 2 years ago today, since Heather Heyer was killed by a white supremacist, we have had numerous white supremacist terrorist attacks. And to me, and I will explain it, I believe there's a straight line between Donald Trump refusing to denounce them on August 12, 2017. In fact, defending them as very fine people, not dedicating the resources of our government to infiltrate and marginalize and destroy them and disrupt them, and the deaths of nearly 75 Americans in the last 2 years, 75 Americans killed on U.S. soil by right-wing extremists, primarily white supremacists. If ISIS had killed 75 people, or Muslim terrorists and 75 people in the last 2 years, we'd be talking about it all the time. Trump would be talking about it, of course, all the time. That plays so well for his base. So, and to remind everyone, just in July, Christopher Wray testified before the Senate. He's the FBI director appointed by Donald Trump. Christopher Wray said, since October alone, we're talking less than a year ago, a majority of the 100 domestic terrorism cases they've investigated are motivated by some version of what you might call white supremacist violence. And yet it's not being covered today, and I don't understand. And, you know, I went back and I looked at, because you have Donald Trump, and I'll play his clip in a second. Before I play his infamous clip where he says, fine people on both sides. And he's recently, again, defended going, I was talking about the good people on the side who were fighting for the statue of Robert E. Lee. I went back and looked at news articles, not the day of the terrorist attack, but the days before, that talked about who was organizing this rally, their sales pitch to get people to go there, how they were advertising, and who was coming. So you could see and hear for yourself, are there fine people on that side? And I submit there's none. And here are different articles. I got some quotes from different articles. New York Times, various publications, all good articles, good quality journalism. So I just want to end the BS, because some on the right now have literally been saying, Joel Pollack from Breitbart just a couple of days ago before Joe Biden challenged him, saying Donald Trump never said fine people. He never defended white supremacists. No, he did. There are no good people. So here's what happened. August 12, 2017 is the date of the rally. News media reports it called the Unite the Right rally. And what sparked it? Well, in February of that year, 2017, advocates began calling for a Robert E. Lee statue to be taken down of the Confederate general. And the city council in February voted to take it down, to sell it, and rename the park from Lee Park to Emancipation Park. And so the result was self-described white nationalists, white supremacists had been protesting about it. Well, this big rally, the Unite the Right rally, was the main activist, the main person who wanted to do this. His name is Jason Kessler. And he's self-described as pro-white. He calls himself a white advocate. He said in an interview before the rally that his goal was to, quote, destigmatize white advocacy so that white people can stand up for their interests just like any other identity group. Kind of interesting, huh? There's no racism there. And then, as the reporting notes, when this language went out there, of course, it immediately got traditional white nationalists, white supremacists to come on board, from the Klan and neo-Nazis and others. In fact, on the day of the rally, David Duke, we all know that infamous scumbag, said about the rally, quote, this represents a turning point for the people of this country. We are determined to take our country back. We're going to fulfill the promises of Donald Trump, because they love Trump, adding, that's what we believed in. That's why we voted for Donald Trump, because he said he's going to take our country back, and that's what we're going to do. That's what that rally was about. In fact, the response of people before the rally in the community, like Reverend Seth Wispeley of the local United Church of Christ, said, people are angry, they're scared, they're hurt, they're confused. White supremacists are rallying in our town. It's an act of violence. And of course, the night before, to dispel any kind of illusion about who these people were, the night before, they had their tiki torches, and here was one of their chants. Clip number 2, please.
You will not replace us! You will not replace us! You will not replace us! You will not replace us!
And of course, the other hideous chant after that, clip number 3.
Jews will not replace us! Jews will not replace us! Jews will not replace us!
And I'll explain what those both mean from the world of white supremacy and white nationalism, because sadly, over the last 2 years, since my dealings with the Daily Stormer and the white supremacists who wanted to kill me, I've become well-versed in them, writing about them, calling them out. I don't care their threats. I continue to write about them and call them out and study them. So on the day of the rally, per the Anti-Defamation League, the people who showed up at this Unite the Right rally, so you can have an understanding of the fine people that were there on the right. There was Richard Spencer, another white nationalist, David Duke, the Confederate White Knights of the Ku Klux Klan, that's their full name, the Hammerskin Nation, don't even know what that is, the Blood and Honor Social Club, and Blood and Honor is a Nazi term, the Daily Stormer, the guys who came after me, Andrew Anglin, were there, the American Guard, and the right-wing Death Squad. And what did they say as they marched through the streets, these fine people? And these are quotes from the ADL. It says the white supremacists marched through the streets of Charlottesville shouting obscenities at crowds and shouting things like "Hail Trump," "Blood and Soil," which is from the Nazi-era slogan "Blut and Boden," which they actually did it in German as well. "You will not replace us." They yelled at protesters who were white race traitors. They carried homemade shields. They had Nazi flags, Confederate flags, and some even wore armbands that has swastika on it. And that's when self-avowed neo-Nazi James Fields, 22 years old, drove his car into the crowd and killed Heather Heyer and injured scores of others. And what did Trump do in response to that? Well, he waited for a while, but then later that day, he gave a sort of a perfunctory response, not the big one that got all the news, but this triggered the news cycle. He said, "We condemn in the strongest possible terms this egregious display of hatred, bigotry, and violence." It would have been great if he would have said on the right side, but he didn't. We condemn the strongest possible terms this display of hatred, bigotry, and violence on many sides. And he repeated, on many sides. You might recall that. It caused an uproar. A couple of days later, he has a press conference, and here his infamous clip. And to me, there's a straight lines. I'll try to make the case for you from this moment, from this statement to where we are today, where white supremacists have killed nearly 75 Americans in the last 2 years. Clip number 4.
On both sides, sir, you said there was hatred, there was violence on both sides.
Well, I do think there's blame. Yes, I think there's blame on both sides. You look at both sides. I think there's blame on both sides, and I have no doubt about it, and you don't have any doubt about it either. And if you reported it accurately, you would say.
Nazis started this. They showed up in Charlottesville. They showed up in Charlottesville to protest.
Excuse me. They let themselves down as you, and you had some very bad people in that group. But you also had people that were very fine people on both sides. You had people in that group. Excuse me. I saw the same pictures as you did. You had people in that group that were there to protest the taking down of, to them, a very, very important statue and the renaming of a park from Robert E. Lee to another name.
From Robert E. Lee to Emancipation Park. And there's Trump defending people who, at the very least, want to defend a statue of a general who fought and killed Americans, the traitor that he was, fought and killed Americans in the name of slavery. A man who owned slaves and was horrific in his treatment of his own slaves. Now, there's no good treatment, but his was especially horrific in family separation. And again, who were the fine people? Look at the list from the ADL, the people who were there. I'm trying to find out, who do you think Trump thought were the fine people? Was it the Confederate White Knights of the Ku Klux Klan? Or was it the Blood and Honor Social Club? Maybe the Daily Stormer guys, because Andrew Anglin, the Daily Stormer, literally wrote over 100 articles praising Donald Trump during the 2016 campaign. So maybe that was the ones. Maybe it was those neo-Nazis. And I want to go back and tell you why I think there's a straight line between Donald Trump and not at that moment, because at that moment, if Donald Trump would have said, August 12, 2017, this is despicable, there's no place for this in the United States of America, and we're going to use the full weight of the federal government to come down on white supremacy and white supremacists, we're going to infiltrate their organizations, we're going to disrupt their actions, we're going to arrest them, we're going to use every resource we have to destroy them. I don't think we would have had the El Paso terrorist attack. I don't think we would have had the terrorist attack in October at the Tree of Life Synagogue or the one in April at a synagogue in California. And I'll explain why. Because first of all, let's go back to these chants. And sadly, I know exactly what these mean now. I didn't when it happened 2 years ago. Let's first do the "You Will Not Replace Us," clip number 2.
You will not replace us. You will not replace us. You will not replace us. You will not replace us.
What that is from is the great replacement theory these white supremacists have. The idea that white people and their culture and their language will be replaced by brown people or black people, but especially brown people now and immigrants replacing them and taking away their opportunities. But even in their view, they articulate it, their white culture, whatever white culture might be. I'm not sure what it is, but in their view, you will not replace us. So they are literally being replaced. And so if you look at their writings and their manifestos, it's about their culture and the language. So when they hear someone not speaking English, instantly goes to the replacement theory. If you heard the term white genocide, it's intertwined with the great replacement theory. The white genocide is there's a genocide of white people carrying out in front of us by the influx of brown people, of black people, Muslim people, everyone who is not them. Then here is especially why I think there's a direct line between Donald Trump's language in August 2017 and the terrorist attacks we saw. Here is clip number 3.
Jews will not replace us! Jews will not replace us! Jews will not replace us!
So just so it's clear, they're not chanting Jews will not replace us because they fear an influx of Jewish people coming to this country and taking their crappy jobs. That's not what this is about. It's not like they fear, oh my God, there's going to be all of a sudden, Jews are 1% to 2% of the country. Then that's not what it is. What it was and what it is and why it's relevant to what we saw in the Tree of Life Pittsburgh synagogue terrorist attack and the one in April in California is that in their view, Jews are helping immigrants come to this country. So they believe it's not Jews will replace them literally. It's Jews are helping empower and embolden those and give comfort to refugees who want to come here. And the gunman, Robert Bowers, the shooter in Pittsburgh, literally wrote, he posted a short time before he went into the synagogue and killed 11 Jewish Americans who were just simply in their place of worship praying. He posted slamming the Hebrew Immigrant Aid Society, which was a program that at one time only helped Jews, but now it helps refugees to come to our country and adjust. He posted how the Jews were committing a genocide to his people. And he said they are bringing invaders in that kill our people. His word was invaders. Trump's word is invaders. The right-wing media word is invaders over and over and over. So when they said Jews will not replace us, and then Bowers goes, I got to go in and do something. That's why if Donald Trump perhaps was a real leader and not someone concerned about getting the support of white supremacists and use the full resources of government, maybe Robert Bowers, maybe his post, and it wasn't like moments before, it was a week before and weeks before he was posting this anti-Semitic garbage about going after Jews and demonizing them. Maybe someone in the government would have seen this because they were dedicated to go on 8chan and these on the other groups that they're well known where they are posting. Same thing, the guy who walked into a temple in California, killed one person, a young guy there, 21 years old, and the suspect, his name is John Ernst, 19 years old. He said he had championed Robert Bowers, the killer there, and talked about in his manifesto he was willing to sacrifice his future for the sake of my people, his white people. If you think this is going away when some group of senior citizens ages out, that's not happening. These terrorists, the guy in El Paso is in his 20s, this gunman 19 years old, the guys who drove the car in Heather Heyer was 21 years old. There's a whole subsect of white angry men in this country that no one will advocate doing anything to. You know, you had two Muslims at San Bernardino, a husband and wife, commit a horrible terrorist attack, killing about 15 people. Trump called for a total ban on Muslims. That's what the time he did it. A week later, you don't hear for anything about angry young white people. You don't hear any policy articulated. No one, not even the left, would dare talk about. Maybe we should have more background checks if you're a young white man between a certain age. Because maybe we need that. Or at the very least, Donald Trump, if he would have dedicated the full resource of government and made it clear there's no place for white supremacy in our nation and meant it. Because when he made that comment about both sides and he defended it, he got praised by David Duke, Richard Spencer. Folks, this is not a game. Since August 12, 2017, as the ADL is documented, nearly 75 Americans have been killed on our soil. It's people, not just Americans. On our soil by right-wing terrorists, primarily have been white supremacists. This is all on Trump's watch. And I wish the Democrat 2020 candidates would talk about that a little bit more. Doesn't have to be the only thing, but it's not just words. You know, I wrote an article for CNN today that, if you want to check it out, it's on facebook.com/DinaRadio, or I tweeted out that Trump has clearly made the division in our country more pronounced, in large part because he did it in 2016 and he saw it worked. And he's doing it now in 2020. It's going to get more and more ugly. And the article was trying to find a silver lining. Not a silver lining, trying to find a moment where we can come together, because it had to do with a football player who did a beautiful thing. And I praised that, and I'm like, what in a moment of darkness, here was a little glimmer of hope, a football player pursuing the American dream, overcoming so many obstacles, scoring a touchdown Thursday in a preseason game for the Browns. But I wrote that as much as I loved that moment, and it made me feel good again, the truth is I don't see any easy fix for what ails our nation. So I will not offer some fortune cookie philosophy like, can't we all get along? No, we can't get all along. We just can't. I wish we could. We can't. We can't until Donald Trump is defeated. We cannot. Once Trump is defeated, and once we drive the bigotry and cruelty of Trump, known as Trumpism, to the margins of society where they belong, in the fringes, maybe then we can get along. But until then, we are locked in a battle for the future of this nation. And led by a man on the right who defends white supremacists and neo-Nazis, and you heard who was in that group, and you know Donald Trump had better intelligence than we did when he made those statements. He knew exactly who was there and said there were fine people on both sides. And since then, we've had numerous white supremacist terrorist attacks. Just less than 2 weeks ago, one on U.S. soil, one of the worst in El Paso, and I don't know why the media is not talking about this today, about this, the 2-year anniversary of when Donald Trump could have stepped up and saved American lives, but he didn't, for political gain. I've said this many times. I said this before the midterm. There's only going to be one winner. It's a binary situation we live in. There'll only be one winner in the midterm. Did you want it to be us or them? And it turned out we all wanted it to be us, and we worked really hard, and we won. November 3rd, 2020, the same bleak, but I'm being candid scenario. It's us or them. Only one of us can win. There's no halfway on bigotry. There's no meeting them halfway on racism, no halfway on putting kids in cages. There's no halfway on banning Muslims or banning transgender Americans from our military, or turning away transgender homeless people from shelters that the Trump administration is doing now, and they're letting homeless shelters do that and still get federal aid. There's no meeting them halfway on that, any of that. There's no halfway on demonizing black people as low IQ and dumb and unintelligent, as Trump has done. There is no halfway on emboldening white supremacy. So there is no common ground, and let's not pretend there is. And there are even pundits on the left who are like saying, well, we should find common ground. Get along. No, we can do that once we win and crush Trumpism. Because look what's in front of us here. This is where we are. This is the stakes. It's our choice. That's why I began today, again, 449 days to the most important election of all of our lives. And I dare say the lives of our children and grandchildren. It's up to us. We are the ones on the wall defending the democracy of this nation, our Constitution and our values. And it really comes down to values. That's why when I have Trump supporters come on, they debate me. Sometimes people want me to yell at them more and stuff. It's a values fight. We have different values. I can't convince them to see the light. If they're fine with kids in cages, they're fine with 6 children, migrant children dying in the last 7 months in Trump custody, if they're fine with an 11-year-old girl crying for her father after they were a massive ICE raid, if you're fine with Donald Trump and everything he's done, from his sexism, bigotry, and racism, what can I say to change your mind? Nothing. So I'd love to hear from you. Do you have any solutions for Trumpism? Because that's what this really is. We have a solution for Trump. That is very easy. November 3rd, 2020. And I think impeachment is part of that. I really do. I think we have to be bluntly political at this point and say that is part of defeating Trump, is Democrats coming back and having impeachment hearings. But what else do we have to do? Because the stakes are never been higher. 866-997-4748. Love to hear from you. You're my guest right at the top of the hour. Then Ellie Mastal will be here the next hour. It's going to be fireworks. If you know Ellie, great guy. And then Rick Unger, our buddy, will be in the third hour. But right now, you are my guest, and I want to hear from you. 866-997-4748. Look, it's time the media start calling out Trump's false statements for what they are. Lies.